The Cursed Prince's Eternal Bride. Bride with Veil, a dark fairy tale crescent moon.
The wind howled through the hollow trees, whispering secrets of the past into the ears of those who dared to listen. The village of Aldemir had long lived in the shadow of the forgotten castle that loomed atop the blackened cliffs. No one ventured near it. No one spoke of it after dusk. It was a place abandoned by time, cursed by sorrow, and swallowed by darkness. But fate is not so easily avoided. On the eve of the harvest moon, an invitation arrived at the doorstep of Evelyn Thatcher, a humble seamstress with eyes as bright as autumn leaves. The parchment was old, the ink almost faded, yet the words carried an unshakable weight. You are cordially invited to Blackthorn Castle for a grand celebration. The heir of the house has chosen his bride. There was no sender's name. No indication of who had written it. But beneath the eerie glow of candlelight, Evelyn noticed something peculiar. The wax seal bore the insignia of a family that had perished over 100 years ago. The Blackthorn family. Rumors told of their tragic end, how the last prince had vanished without a trace, his soul forever bound to the castle. Some said he had been cursed. Others whispered that he still wandered the halls, waiting for a bride who would never come. Evelyn's hands trembled as she held the invitation. The words were clear. The heir had chosen his bride. And her name was Evelyn. A journey into darkness. Despite the foreboding sense of dread, something beyond her control pulled Evelyn toward the castle. Perhaps it was the mystery that gripped her, the unanswered questions that gnawed at her mind. Or perhaps, it was the feeling that she had heard the prince's name before, though she could not recall where. At sunset, she found herself on the path to Blackthorn Castle, her lantern flickering against the rising mist. The road was long and winding, carved through an ancient forest where the trees bent as though whispering to one another. Then, as if conjured from the depths of the earth itself, the castle appeared. Its towering spires reached for the heavens, cloaked in the shadow of the approaching night. The iron gates groaned open on their own, inviting her in. Evelyn hesitated. The air smelled of rain and something else, something decayed. The ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse, as if the castle itself were alive. Then, a voice called to her. You came. She turned sharply, but the path behind her was empty. The voice had not come from the trees, nor the wind. It had come from within the castle. Evelyn swallowed her fear and stepped through the threshold. The doors slammed shut behind her. The phantom host. The great hall was illuminated by hundreds of candles, their golden glow casting long shadows against the ornate walls. A grand feast had been prepared, silver trays laden with fruits, steaming meats, and goblets brimming with deep red wine. But the table was empty. No guests. No servants. Only Evelyn. Then, the air shifted. A presence loomed behind her, cold and unyielding. Slowly, she turned. At the head of the table stood a man, dressed in fine regal attire. His dark hair fell in soft waves, his pale skin luminescent beneath the candlelight. But it was his eyes, deep crimson, filled with an unspeakable sorrow, that rooted her to the ground. Welcome, my bride, he murmured. Evelyn's breath caught. This was him. The cursed prince of Blackthorn Castle. But he was not a ghost. He was something far worse. The dance of shadows. Before Evelyn could speak, the prince extended his hand. Dance with me, he said, his voice laced with something both pleading and commanding. Her body moved against her will, her hands slipping into his. The music started, though there were no musicians, no instruments. It was a melody born from the walls themselves, from the whispers of those who had once lived and died here. The prince's grip was cold as ice, yet his touch burned like fire. They moved across the ballroom, their steps in perfect harmony. Evelyn's heartbeat pounded in her ears. Why me? She whispered. The prince's lips parted, as if to answer, but then, something shifted in his gaze. A flicker of pain. Regret. And then, anger. Do not fight it, he warned. Evelyn tried to pull away. His grip tightened. The candles flickered violently, and for the first time, she saw them. The others. Ghostly figures, their faces twisted in eternal sorrow, lined the edges of the ballroom. Brides of the past. Women who had once stood where she stood now. And every single one of them had met the same fate. A fate Evelyn was now bound to. The clock strikes midnight. A grandfather clock in the hall struck 12. The chime echoed through the castle, shaking the very foundation. The prince released her, his expression darkening. "Time is running out," he murmured. Evelyn staggered back, breathless. "For what?" The prince hesitated, his crimson eyes searching hers. And then, softly, he whispered, "For you to remember." A sharp pain shot through her skull. Memories flooded her mind, images of another life, another time. A love that had been torn apart by fate. A promise that had been broken. A curse that had been cast. She had been here before. And she had died here before. The room spun. The voices of the past screamed in her ears. Evelyn collapsed to the floor as the prince knelt beside her, his voice the last thing she heard before the darkness swallowed her whole. "You are mine, Evelyn. You have always been mine." Darkness stretched endlessly around Evelyn. She floated in a void where time ceased to exist, where echoes of voices whispered through the abyss. Then, suddenly, her eyes shot open. She was lying in a grand canopy bed, draped in deep crimson sheets. The scent of old parchment, candle wax, and something faintly metallic clung to the air. Her head pounded as flashes of memory flickered in her mind, her dance with the prince, the ghostly brides, and the cryptic words. "For you to remember." The moment she sat up, a shadow moved near the fireplace. "You fainted," the prince's voice murmured. He stood with his back to her, gazing into the flames. His regal attire looked untouched by time, and yet, his very presence radiated centuries of sorrow. Evelyn's heart pounded. You said I've been here before." The prince turned to her, his crimson eyes burning with an unreadable emotion. "Yes." "What does that mean?" Her voice trembled. He exhaled softly. "You were once my bride. And you shall be again." A cold dread seeped into Evelyn's bones. "No, that's impossible. I don't know you." But even as she said it, her mind screamed otherwise. There was something hauntingly familiar about him. About this castle. About herself. The prince stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "Your soul remembers, even if your mind does not." The room darkened as the fire dimmed, the air thickening with unseen forces. A sudden whisper filled the chamber, disembodied yet eerily intimate. "Run." Evelyn gasped. The prince's expression hardened. "Ignore them." The whispers grew louder. "You must leave before the curse binds you again." Evelyn clutched the sheets. "Who is saying that?" A gust of wind extinguished the remaining candles. The room plunged into darkness, and the whispers melted into tormented wails. Evelyn scrambled out of bed, her pulse hammering in her ears. Then, a flicker of pale light illuminated the far side of the room. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman in a tattered wedding gown. Her face was hollow, her eyes void of pupils. Evelyn barely had time to scream before the ghostly bride lunged at her. The ghosts of the past. Evelyn stumbled backward, her breath caught in her throat as the spectral bride hovered inches from her face. Cold, deathly fingers grazed her cheek. "Break the cycle," the ghost rasped. "Or you will be trapped like us." Then, she dissolved into mist. The room fell into silence once more, save for Evelyn's ragged breaths. She spun toward the prince, who remained unshaken. His face was unreadable, but his eyes carried something close to grief. "They are remnants of the past," he said. "They mean well, but they do not understand." "Understand what?" Evelyn's voice wavered. "That you and I are bound by fate. That our love has endured beyond death." Evelyn clenched her fists. "I don't remember any of this. I don't remember you." The prince studied her for a long moment before stepping closer. "Then allow me to remind you." He raised his hand, and suddenly, the world twisted. The fractured memories. The walls melted away, revealing a grand ballroom bathed in golden candlelight. 100 masked figures twirled and laughed, their silk gowns and suits untouched by time. Evelyn was no longer in her simple dress. She wore an opulent gown, the fabric shimmering under the light. A reflection caught her eye. She was standing beside the prince, her fingers intertwined with his. The memory unfolded before her. They danced, just as they had earlier that night. But this time, she saw herself smiling. Laughing. Loving him. Then, the memory shifted. The golden light darkened into crimson. The guests' laughter twisted into shrieks of terror. Evelyn's own reflection in the ballroom mirror turned pale, her lips parted in horror. She watched as a dark figure emerged from the shadows. A sorcerer cloaked in midnight, his eyes burning like dying embers. He raised his hand, and the castle trembled. "You shall be cursed for eternity," the sorcerer snarled. Evelyn gasped as she watched herself, her past self, collapse to the floor, her body going limp in the prince's arms. The curse had not been placed upon the prince alone. It had been placed upon her, too. The vision shattered, and Evelyn was thrown back into the present. She gasped, gripping the edge of a nearby table. The prince stood before her, his gaze filled with an agonizing longing. "Now do you remember?" Tears blurred Evelyn's vision. "We were in love." Yes. The weight of truth crushed down on her. She had died that night. The curse had ensured they would be reborn again and again, only for their love to end in tragedy every time. "How many times?" she choked out. The prince lowered his gaze. "Too many." Her stomach twisted. "Then why do I keep coming back?" The prince stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers. "Because fate has not yet decided to let us go." Evelyn's vision blurred. The ghostly brides. The whispers. The fragments of memories that had haunted her all her life. She had lived this story before. And she was living it again. But this time, something felt different. This time, she had a choice. The choice of fate. A clock chimed from somewhere deep within the castle. The air grew heavy, charged with unseen power. The prince's expression darkened. "Midnight is approaching. If you stay beyond the 12th chime, the curse will claim you once more." Evelyn's breath hitched. She had minutes. Minutes to decide whether to break free from this cycle or accept the fate that had been written for her centuries ago. The voices of the past whispered in her ears. The prince's crimson eyes held her captive. The clock struck again. She had to choose. And she had to choose now. The grandfather clock's chimes echoed through the grand hall, each strike vibrating through Evelyn's bones. The prince stood before her, his crimson eyes watching, waiting. "Choose, Evelyn." His voice was soft, yet it carried the weight of centuries. She could feel the curse tightening around them both, its unseen tendrils reaching, pulling, binding. The 11th chime rang. She had seconds left. Run, or stay. Break the curse, or become its prisoner once more. Evelyn's mind reeled. She had seen the truth. She and the prince had loved before, only to be torn apart by the sorcerer's wrath. If she stayed, would she be trapped in this cycle forever? Or, was there another way? The 12th chime struck. And Evelyn made her choice. She turned, bolting toward the massive castle doors. Her heart pounded as she gripped the iron handles and pulled with all her strength. The doors groaned but did not budge. The shadows in the hall thickened, coiling around her wrists like chains. A voice, low and sorrowful, spoke behind her. "You cannot leave." Evelyn spun around. The prince stood just steps away, his face unreadable. His crimson eyes dimmed, filled with something that sent a pang through her chest. It was not anger. It was loss. "You promised me once that you would never run," he whispered. Evelyn's pulse hammered. "I never made that promise." The castle trembled. The shadows along the walls rippled, flickering between past and present. In one moment, the hall was grand, filled with golden chandeliers and flowing silk banners. In the next, it was a crumbling ruin, covered in decay. Then, Evelyn saw her past self. A flickering image of herself from long ago stood at the center of the hall, dressed in a wedding gown. And before her stood the prince, younger, full of life, holding her hands in his. "No matter what happens, I will find you," her past self whispered. "Even in death. Even in eternity." Evelyn gasped. She had said those words. The prince lifted his gaze. "We are bound, Evelyn. You cannot break what was sworn in love." A chill ran down her spine. Was the curse truly an imprisonment? Or, was it a vow? The castle groaned, as if responding to her hesitation. The air thickened, charged with a dark energy that slithered through the walls. The prince stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You still do not remember everything." Evelyn braced herself. "Then show me." The moment the words left her lips, the world shifted. A sharp wind howled through the hall, and suddenly, Evelyn was no longer in the castle. She was outside, beneath a sky filled with storm clouds, standing at the edge of a blackened altar. Her past self stood beside the prince once more. But this time, the image was different. It was their wedding. The prince placed a silver ring on her finger, his hands trembling. The sorcerer loomed in the distance, unseen to their eyes, weaving a curse so powerful that it would bind them to this fate for eternity. Evelyn gasped as she saw her past self smile at the prince. "No matter the cost, I will find my way back to you," she whispered. The sky darkened. Thunder cracked. And then, death. The curse took hold. The vision shattered. Evelyn stumbled backward, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The prince was watching her, his expression unreadable. "Now you know," he murmured. Evelyn pressed a hand to her chest. "The curse isn't just keeping you here." She swallowed hard. "It's keeping me here, too." The prince nodded. And for the first time, Evelyn understood. They had been damned together. A cold laugh slithered through the air. Evelyn spun around as a shadow took form at the edge of the hall. The sorcerer. His hollow eyes gleamed with cruel amusement as he stepped forward, his long robes dragging across the floor. "Ah, and so the little bride finally remembers." Evelyn clenched her fists. "Why did you do this to us?" The sorcerer chuckled darkly. "Because love is a weakness. And your love defied the laws of fate. You were never meant to be together." The castle trembled as the sorcerer raised his hands. "But do not worry, dear girl. Tonight, you shall die again. And this time, you will not return." A violent wind howled through the room, and the torches flickered wildly. The prince moved before Evelyn, his body shielding her. "You will not take her from me again." The sorcerer sneered. "Then fight me, cursed prince. Let us see if your love is strong enough to defy death itself." The air erupted with dark magic. The castle walls shook violently as the sorcerer summoned black tendrils of shadow, hurling them toward the prince. Evelyn screamed as the prince dodged, his own power flaring to life. A red glow surrounded him, his eyes burning like molten fire. The two clashed in a storm of magic, shadows and crimson light colliding in the air. The sorcerer snarled, summoning a chain of darkness that wrapped around the prince's throat. "You cannot escape fate," the sorcerer roared. Evelyn's heart pounded. She had been powerless before. But now, she knew the truth. She was part of this curse. And if she had been bound to it, then she could break it. Steeling herself, she reached deep within. A warmth bloomed in her chest, a golden light spreading from her fingertips. She was no longer just the cursed bride. She was the one who could end it. With a cry, she threw her hands forward. Light erupted from her palms, striking the sorcerer in the chest. The sorcerer screamed as the golden energy surged through him, his body cracking like shattered glass. The castle trembled one last time before. Silence. The sorcerer was gone. The curse was broken. And the prince. The prince was still there. Evelyn turned to him, her breath catching. "You're free." He reached for her, his hands warm. "We both are." Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped into his embrace, the weight of eternity lifting from their shoulders. For the first time in centuries, they were together. And this time, fate would not take them apart. The castle, once a place of sorrow, stood under a golden sunrise. The ghosts that had wandered its halls were gone, freed from their torment. Evelyn and the prince walked through the great doors, this time, without chains. They had defeated fate. And in doing so, they had finally earned their happily ever after.